Okay, it's really late and I want to go to bed, but I'm getting pretty significant backlash from a series of short videos that I posted on YouTube earlier today, and I would like to add some additional context and gently challenge y'all to reconsider the way you are engaging with those videos. It's interesting, my viewership on Instagram and on TikTok tends to be much younger, and I'm not having the same kind of big feelings, angry feelings from people in the comments. People know that I work with Drumbeat Labs and often make sponsored content about various subjects that they ask me to speak on. Maybe it's beef prices, maybe it is the cost of car insurance going up, maybe it's about how it's more expensive to go to sports ball than ever. They're often videos about economics and about the unaffordability of life in the United States. Sometimes there are videos asking me to bring attention to like a lawsuit somewhere, but overwhelmingly they're on economic issues. In particular, the ways that the American dream is not accessible to younger generations, the way that things have changed so significantly in the United States that people can't afford to go on vacations, they can't afford their healthcare, they can't afford car insurance, they can't afford to buy a home. And the cost of college, the cost of housing, the cost of everything in terms of a percentage of our income is so much higher now for younger generations than it was for boomers. America is literally becoming so much more unaffordable. Boomers got to climb the ladder and then pulled the ladder up behind them. I'm on the tail end of millennial and I'll likely never be able to retire. This is in response to a video where I was talking about how boomers are 20% of the population, but they control 50% of the wealth and thus live in a very different America. Their experience of trying to function in late stage capitalism in the US is so different from ours. Gen X have half as much wealth. Millennials have a quarter of the wealth of boomers. In particular, when we're talking about retirement accounts, but especially when we're talking about access to owning property, to owning housing. My Gen Z kids talk about how they'll never be able to afford a down payment on a home. So what do you think is the path forward out of this? Because we know that it's unsustainable for all of us. I'm young Gen X. It's unsustainable for all of us who are younger than boomers. Boomers' grandkids don't feel that they have access to the American dream at all, while their grandparents continue to experience and live it out. And yet we see this criticism of younger generations all the time, right? With millennials, it was like, well, if you'd stop buying lattes and avocado toast, then you could afford a house. With Gen Z, it's like if you stopped buying boba tea and Labubus, you could afford to buy a house. And that's simply not true. Boomers were able to buy into the market when houses were a much smaller percentage of your income, and then able to deal with and benefit from the appreciation of property value. Boomers have had access to purchasing property in a way that subsequent generations have not had. Likewise, boomers have a much greater share of the stock market. They are more likely to have a pension as well as having a 401k or IRA or multiple 401ks and IRAs. The reason that I'm making those videos, and I've been very careful with my wording, is not to insult boomers, but to highlight the economic disparity and how boomers are still benefiting from the way that the United States and the economy was significantly different when they were younger. They are living in a different reality than the rest of us, overwhelmingly, because they have much greater access to resources because the way that this country functioned before Ronald Reagan became president was completely different in so many respects. My parents were silent generation. They benefited from this dynamic as well, able to accumulate wealth, own their own home, have a retirement account, have a full pension in ways that subsequent generations have not had access to. And it's gotten steadily worse. That's why I've talked about how, Gen X has half as much wealth as boomers, and millennials have 1/4 as much wealth as boomers. That's not a dig on boomers, and yet over and over and over again in my comments over the last 3 hours, boomers are losing their ever-loving minds, taking offense, choosing to manufacture offense, accusing me of being on a boomer hate train or for hurting their feelings or not understanding the ways that their life has been difficult and that I'm not appreciating that appropriately in the way I've put out my videos. When we're talking about generational differences and we're talking about how the economy and opportunity and access have changed from boomers to Gen X to millennials to Gen Z and Gen Alpha, That's not a personal insult against you. You don't need to manufacture offense. And if you are not one of the 80+% of boomers who's been able to purchase a home and benefit from being able to own property and watch that property appreciate in value in a way that makes it entirely unaffordable for the youth at this point in time to be able to buy into the housing market at all, that's not a personal insult against you. We're talking about systems. We're not talking about you. You don't need to manufacture offense. If somebody makes a video about Gen X and talks about the ways that we are economically advantaged over Gen Z, I don't need to take offense at that because I understand that that is not a personal attack on me. All of the people really mad in my comments, and some of y'all have said really, really mean things to me, including comments like this one. I got too upset to continue to grab screenshots of all of the mean things that were said, but they're real mean because I'm explaining the ways that younger generations feel that the ladder got pulled up and they no longer have access to prosperity and security and financial stability. And it's not just their feelings. The facts point to that as well. The statistics are there to say, actually, subsequent generations are not as prosperous. It's not as easy for them. That's not to say that if you're a boomer and you don't own your home, or you don't have a big 401k, or your life has not been easy, that's not us dismissing your personal circumstances. We are talking about systemic issues. Like, I just don't know how many times I can repeat that. It feels like a lot of people watched those videos and chose to center themselves and center their own feelings rather than understanding that those videos are actually about the youth. Those videos are actually about how things are so much shittier for our youth today because of the system that we're living in, and that it's difficult for a lot of boomers to understand exactly how precarious younger generations actually are. Because so many boomers are really living in a different reality. They own their homes. They're able to afford vacations. They're able to tap into their 401ks and their IRAs. They have their pensions. They have their really good health insurance. They have good health insurance and they have Medicare on top of that. We're likely not going to see any of that unless we bring about huge changes in this country. Having conversations about that is really important, and it's not a personal insult against you. And it gives a particular kind of fragility and a particular kind of needing to center yourself and choosing to take offense. And please understand, this is like the gentlest of criticisms. Please stop doing that. I have people in my comments who are like, Angela, you're not appreciating that boomers are the ones out at protests, that boomers are the ones who are showing up to all the Indivisible meetings. I totally appreciate that. I talk about that frequently. Do you know why boomers are able to participate in grassroots organizing more and able to go to protests more? Because they're more financially stable. Because they own their homes, they have money in the bank, they have a pension, they have access to resources and time that younger generations don't. In fact, when we look at when countries tip over from democracy into straight up democratic backsliding and then full on authoritarian overreach, one of the key indicators for when a democracy is going to go under is people are unable to meet their basic needs. People are just scrambling to keep their heads above water. They can't afford rent. They can't afford groceries. Having significant economic disparity between the wealthiest in the country and everybody else, that's an indicator that a democracy is at high risk for faltering. All the younger generations that are not able to go to Indivisible meetings, that are not able to go to protests, it's because they're working 2 and 3 jobs. It's because they don't have the same kind of financial resources, and they're working 2 or 3 jobs, so when they get home, they're exhausted, they're taking care of their small children, and they can't bring themselves to go to a meeting at 6:30 on a weeknight because they're running on fumes. When people are pushed to their limits, and it requires all of their time and attention and resources to meet their basic needs, they don't have the capacity to engage with the democratic process because they don't have the time and the availability. And not only that, they definitely don't have time to organize to resist. All of this labor that boomers are doing in the resistance movement, please understand, your position, your meaning your generation overwhelmingly, your position of having more economic stability, that allows you to do that work. Reasons that you don't see millennials, Gen Z, and Gen Alpha at your organizing events or at town halls with our elected officials is not because they're lazy. It's because they live a different reality than you. And that's the point of my videos. Are you familiar with the term, if it doesn't apply, let it fly? If you saw those videos and you chose to get really angry, I'm asking you to listen to what they were actually about, instead of getting your hackles up because somebody is talking about boomers. You are not unappreciated. Your individual circumstances and the ways you've struggled are not being discounted. Your value in society and your value in the resistance movement are not being diminished by any of my videos. The opportunity and access that you had in the past is not something that has been replicated for younger generations. That impacts not only their quality of life right now, it impacts their ability to be involved in resistance work. I also really encourage you to go on any of the platforms where I have posted these videos and look at the comments from Gen Z, Millennials, and Gen X.